Chapter 24. October 11th. I am on the rise before the fall, the part of the roller coaster that takes you higher and higher, and it would be fun, except for the anticipation of the breathtaking drop at the top of the hill. Things have been going too well, and I keep waiting for the drop, for something bad to happen. I'm not the kind of girl that sits with a group of friends at lunch. Or am I? Who would I be if things had been different? I'm not the kind of girl that feels giddy over a boy and melts on the inside when he smiles at me. Am I? I didn't realize that hiding from others kept me hidden from myself. I never stopped to figure out who I was and what I liked and what I wanted. What I really, really want is to stop being as afraid as I was when I was 7 years old. I remember holding my breath when the boy called out to me from across the road. He had been playing at the park, in the dark, all alone, and he didn't sound afraid. He sounded like he wanted to help. I remember his words. "Is someone there? Are you okay?" he asked. I was hidden in the shadow of a tree. He couldn't possibly see me. I held in my sobs and sat as still as the tree trunk so that he would think no one was there. Instead, he stepped into the road. I remember the image of the boy, red tennis shoes, a light jean jacket, and brown hair that was tasseled from the wind. Every detail is burned into my memory, as the boy was caught in a beam of light. I thought maybe he was a descendant like me, but then I heard the sound of an engine. The light shifted as the headlights bore down on the boy. The car was driving too fast for a winding road in the dark, and the boy was moving too slow. Treadon Nelson. Sunday was a blur of pain and sleep and unanswerable questions. Abigail pulled a mattress into Treadon's room for Jaren. He didn't have any injuries from the accident except for a headache. "I don't see any signs of concussion." Abigail had just finished stitching up the gash in Treadon's shoulder. She'd sewn the wound like she was a veteran nurse in a war zone. Her ease with the needle and thread was as strange as the looks she and Gabe kept sharing. Treadon could hear the back and forth. "Tell him. Don't tell him. He's ready. I'm not ready." "Stop!" Treadon couldn't take it any longer. His shoulder throbbed, his stomach was queasy, and nothing made sense about what had happened. "I'm done." Abigail lifted the needle and thread into the air, showing she'd finished sewing him up. That wasn't what Treadon had been talking about. "No, I mean stop keeping things from me. Stop acting like I can't see you two talking about me over my head. What don't you want to tell me? And what am I not ready for?" Jaren sat up, eyes squinted from the headache. "And how did you guys know about the accident so fast?" Abigail and Gabe shared a glance. They were only going to give a partial truth, but it was better than nothing. Treadon knew if he pushed, he'd get more lies. Abigail answered, "Gabe and I work together to help people who can't help themselves. I can see things, find people when they need to be found, and Gabe goes to help them. That's why he's gone so much, helping people." She said the words like she was convincing herself. Treadon shifted in his seat. He tried to pull his shirt back over his head, but the stitches pulled and his muscles locked up. Abigail took the shirt and helped him. Jaren leaned back on the kitchen stool, balancing on the back two legs like gravity had no claim on him. "You see things?" He sounded skeptical. "Like the accident?" "No, I didn't see the accident." Abigail looked to Gabe for help. "There are some things in this world that can't be detected with the basic 5 senses, like the energy your body gives off," Gabe said. "Like the heat you can see through infrared cameras," said Jaren, coming back to all 4 legs of the stool. "Yes, similar to that," Gabe said. "There's an energy given off by the soul, an aura. Abigail can sense those who have a special aura." Again, a glance. They were not telling him everything, but still, the information they were sharing gave him chills. His mom was special, gifted, and she used it for good. Treadon might have rejected the idea a week ago, but believing his mom could see a glowing light around people wasn't as far-fetched as Ellie being descended from angels. "This doesn't explain anything about the accident," Jaren shrugged. "You're taking this very well," Gabe said, looking at Jaren with lowered eyebrows. Suspicion. Both Abigail and Gabe seemed more interested in Jaren's reactions to their story than his own. Treadon tried not to feel a twist of jealousy. He couldn't imagine why Jaren had captured their attention. There's been plenty of research into auras and energy, people with extra sensitive sensory receptors, Jaren said. There were a couple of projects at my dad's company, like a satellite that could help track the population for global warming, but I didn't get to look very close at those. It isn't hard to believe that there are people who can see auras. It's rare, but I believe it. Did your dad's company build your car too? Abigail asked. Jaren nodded in answer and pushed a question of his own. Sensing auras doesn't explain how you knew about the accident. Abigail looked down. I like to keep track, like every mom. And I usually know where Treadon is, like a parent app on your cell phone, except he doesn't have to have his cell phone with him. Then you knew he was okay. Jaren had a Rachel-like intensity about him, interrogation mode. Why did you come so fast? It was Gabe's turn again. There are bad people who would want to stop me from doing what I do, even hurt someone close to me. We were afraid that the people who drove you off the road were there because of us. Treadon's mind skipped to Ellie, her fear, her secrets. But we won't let it happen again. Abigail kept her eyes on Gabe for a long second, and then turned to Treadon. I know you have a lot of questions. I know we haven't given you a lot of details, but it was for this reason. I don't want you to have to suffer for our mistakes or be collateral damage for a cause you never signed up for. Abigail closed the drawer where she kept the needle and thread. It was the sign of the conversation closing as well. Get some rest, Abigail said, kissing Treadon on the forehead. We'll talk more in the morning. But sleep wasn't as easy as his mom made it sound. His shoulder ached, and he tossed and turned each time the pain pulled him from sleep. Jaren hit the mattress and didn't move. The pillow pulled over his head like he could block out the world. Treadon was jealous of his soundless sleep each time he checked the clock, and another 10 minutes had crept by. He fell into a fitful sleep about 3, but something pulled him back out of the darkness only 2.5 hours later. It was a sound that didn't belong in his house, but one he recognized immediately. The noise was low and muted, not meant for his ears, but close enough that it was unmistakable. Football. Not the sound that comes from a professionally recorded game on ESPN. It was the chaotic noise of personal game tapes. Treadon's breathing came a little faster. The low murmur of voices floated in through the hall. No one in this house had ever watched his game tapes. Abigail worked too hard. Gabe wasn't always around, and when he was, football was not the subject of conversation. So why now? Maybe pining for the time lost with his son who'd almost died? Maybe the near-death experience had made them want to be more supportive. Maybe they suddenly saw value in what he did, instead of Gabe's constant disappointment in him. Treadon rolled out of bed, but the stabbing pain from his shoulders made him pause, kneeling on the ground in the small space between his bed and the mattress Jaren slept on. He waited for the crippling pain to subside. He stood up and slipped into the hallway, careful to hold the door so the hinges didn't squeak. If his mom was taking a moment to appreciate his skill on the football field, he wanted to witness it, unobserved. He tried not to think of the consequences of having a hurt shoulder. They had a game this weekend, and he wasn't sure he'd be able to throw the ball. How bad would that hurt his chances at an offer? Gabe's office door stood slightly ajar. Gabe watching his game tapes? A strange, almost embarrassing excitement rose in him. He could see the office through the slit in the door, Gabe sitting in his office chair, Abigail standing behind him, both of their eyes glued to the computer monitor. He couldn't see what was on the screen. The only other thing visible was the perpetual motion device that had been there as long as Treadon could remember. Even now, the constant spinning motion of the circles, spinning around and inside of each other, a couple of small marbles that added weight to the circles and kept them spinning. When Treadon was little, he used to watch it, trying to see how they managed to spin without bumping into each other, and how they continued their rotation, where each circle began and the next one ended. They moved too fast for him to make any conclusive discoveries, and he'd never seen it stopped. The motion device had captured his attention for a moment, and it took him a second to remember why he was standing in the hall. Proud parents, watching football game tapes. He almost laughed. It wasn't a life he'd ever had. As much as he loved his mom, she had only pushed football when she realized it would make him money and take him far away. Even though he couldn't see the front of the monitor, the looks on their faces weren't what he'd hoped for anyway. Instead of awe or pride or whatever he'd been hoping for, there was a look of deep consternation, like they were looking for something beyond the monitor screen. He'd come too far now. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The screen was turned enough that he could see the football field and the jerseys moving around. The number that streaked across the screen was not his. The name across the shoulder read, Calavan, number 7. They were watching game tapes of Jaren, not him. Jaren caught a smeared bullet arching through the sky and ran it in for a touchdown. Then another shot. Jaren, juking a defender, running center field, making a catch, and dancing out of the way of 3 more guys before spiking the ball in the end zone. Black screen. Jaren's jersey front and center. A defender illegally grabbed his jersey and held him back. The ball flew overhead, out of reach. Jaren knocked the defender off him and dashed across the field. He shouldn't have made the catch. He'd been too far behind, but he did, diving forward to grab the ball with the tips of his fingers. Gabe noticed Treadon, a small glance out of the corner of his eye, but he kept his focus on the screen. He's fast. Gabe clicked the mouse, replaying the shot, almost like the ground moves him. His aura is normal, not like his car, Abigail said, leaning on the back of Gabe's chair. What are you looking for? Treadon couldn't keep quiet any longer. You think his aura should be brighter? Because he's good at football? Abigail jumped at his voice. Gabe closed the video and turned to face him. There was a pause, a breath, like something more was going to be said, like the answer was a hair's breadth away. They were interrupted by a loud knocking on the front door. Abigail looked at her phone. It's 5:30 in the morning. Who would be here this early? Treadon saw Gabe glance at the blank wall of his office, like he was considering something on the far side. Let me check first. Abigail and Treadon followed Gabe down the hallway and into the living room. Gabe checked through the peephole. It's a woman. I don't know her. Abigail stepped forward and checked. Normal. Abigail glanced at Treadon. Nothing strange about her aura. Do you really do that all the time? Treadon asked. Jaren wandered out of the bedroom, scratching his head. What's going on? Who's pounding on my skull before the sun is even up? Gabe answered. There's a woman at the door. She's a stranger, but after what happened, it's better to be cautious. The knocking continued. Not like a friendly neighbor visit, but a persistent sound. Jaren pushed past Abigail and looked through the peephole. It's Miss Littleton, my father's secretary. Jaren twisted the 3 deadbolts and turned the lock. You know, there are better security systems than this one. Miss Littleton nearly fell forward as she continued pounding without the door in the way. Jaren caught her by the shoulders and helped her stand up. Your father told me to bring your car and give you this. She handed him the keys. And turn on the news. She looked up and down the street. I can't say anything else, but stay here until things settle down. She pulled the door shut, and Treadon saw her hustle down the stairs and out to a car parked on the street. There was another driver waiting for her. Treadon leaned out onto the porch and saw the Aston Martin in all its glory parked in their driveway, clean as a whistle, no sign of damage. He heard a click behind him and saw Abigail, remote in hand. The sound of the news report filled the room. LA was shocked this morning with the news of the closure of the business giant XC Energy. There have been no warnings that this business was in trouble, and 1,000 local employees have been laid off. The company assures a smooth transition for those who depend on electricity, but the layoff came without warning, without severance, and without any kind of explanation. The newsfeed switched to the clip of a man being interviewed. They didn't tell us anything. A lot of people are out of work, and over 1 million people have less than 24 hours to switch energy companies. We deserve some answers. A press conference is scheduled for 4 p.m. this afternoon, but that hasn't stopped protesters from marching on the Calavan mansion. Xander Calavan is the owner of XC Energy and has yet to give a statement. The clip changed to drone footage of the Calavan estate. The words, protest at Calavan mansion, scrolled across the screen. Looks like I need to change my last name. Jaren was frozen in place, fists clenched, but his voice sounded the same, sarcastic, like nothing could touch him. Abigail hit the power button, and the screen went blank. We better move the car into the garage, Gabe said. He opened his hand toward Jaren. I can do it, Jaren said. I'll move our car. Treadon jumped up, grateful to have something to do. His shoulder hurt, a burning sensation, but he couldn't imagine what Jaren was going through right now. I'll make some breakfast. Abigail tossed the remote on the couch as the 3 of them headed out to play Tetris with the cars and motorcycle. It only took a few minutes. As they sat down to breakfast, Jaren's cell phone broke the silence with the original chorus to Beat It. Jaren pulled his phone out of his pocket and smiled. Only one person I know who is crazy enough to be up watching the 6 o'clock news. He pressed the screen. Where are you? Rachel's voice had a sharp, panicked pitch and was loud enough to be heard by everyone in the room. In the kitchen? Jaren had a slight smirk, as if the idea of Rachel panicking over him was his own idea of a prank. Are you at home? Rachel asked. I just saw the news. I'll come pick you up. What are you going to do? Drive through the crowd like a bowling ball? This isn't funny. You shouldn't be there if the protests get out of control. Rachel's voice was dead serious. Determined, yet on the edge of hysteria, Treadon could picture her driving straight through a crowd to get to Jaren. Jaren must have believed it, too. I'm not there. I'm at Treadon's. Thank God. Rachel let out an audible breath into her phone's speakers. I'm not that far. Don't move. Where do you think I'm gonna go? Rachel had already hung up. Jaren stared at the phone. Does she think I'm going to go talk down the mob? Abigail put her hand on Jaren's shoulder. You're welcome here as long as you need. Thank you, Miss Nelson. I really appreciate it. They had each dished up a plate when Rachel walked in without knocking. Gabe was halfway across the room with his hands up for a fight before Rachel had a full foot inside the door. Gabe pulled up short and turned around, hiding a look that made Treadon go cold. Gabe's face was hard and emotionless. Treadon had no doubt that if it had been an enemy, the person stepping through the door would be dead. What happened to you? Rachel asked, pointing at the bandages across Treadon's shoulder. We had a couple friends run us off the road. Jaren answered. What? Rachel stepped forward, her notebook coming up in a reflexive motion. Who were they? When did this happen? Was anyone hurt? Good to see you too, Jaren said, his mouth full of scrambled eggs. Gabe cleared his throat. It's possible that those people who chased you off the road wanted revenge for things I've done. I may have put you all in danger. Treadon thought about the accident, the shutdown, Xander's last goodbye. I think you're wrong, Treadon said to Gabe. There was more to Gabe than Treadon knew, more than they said last night, but the accident didn't have anything to do with Gabe's secret life. Why would you say that? Gabe asked. Those people who ran us off the road? That wasn't about whatever you two do in your spare time, Treadon said. It was about XC energy. It was to scare Xander into selling out his company. Gabe's eyebrows came together. A question, but Treadon could also see relief that there was another reason for the accident. Rachel walked right up to Jaren. We need to find out what's going on. I'm calling that source, whether it's dangerous or not. You deserve some answers.